So welcome everybody. We are going to get started on our second Jen Stark project, and this is inspired by Jen Stark's Wormhole. So if you think back to what we learned about her, this is inspired by the work that she did for the Video Music Awards when she was working with Mylie Cyrus. So for this project, you're going to notice that I'm holding my canvas going side to side. Once you have your canvas oriented side to side or landscape orientation, make sure you have your double puck out. And remember, this little white dot here at the bottom is the dot for your shortcuts, and that is where you're going to pull out your double puck. And that's that little oval right here with the two dark dots. Once you have your double puck out and you have your canvas ready to go, the next thing that you want to do is you want to start to make some squares. And we actually have a tool right here on our top toolbar that's going to help us draw a perfect square. So as you look across that top toolbar, you're going to notice a selection for shapes. And one of those shapes is a square. So you're going to go ahead and click on your Draw Styles tool, and you're going to move over to that third selection, and you're going to select the rectangle. Once you have the rectangle selected, you need to tell it what size and color to draw it. So you're going to leave your inking pen right in the top dot of your double puck, and you're just going to be sure that it's set to size 5. Remember, 5.1, 5.8, they all work as long as that first number is the number 5. You also want to be sure that your opacity is up at 100. Even though we're not drawing with the inking pen, setting these two things is telling our draw tool how thick to make the line of our rectangle and how opaque to make it. Since the top dot sets the thickness of our lines and how opaque it is, the bottom dot sets the color. So you want to be sure that you have black in the bottom dot of your double puck. And remember, you can create that black by simply dragging downward on whatever color that you have in there. Now that I have my tools set up and ready to draw, this Draw Styles tool makes it really, really easy to get a perfect rectangle. So I'm just going to move my double puck here out of the way, which is sometimes a little bit challenging. I'm going to put my size back where it needs to go. There we go. And now, using my draw tool, I'm simply going to pull a nice big rectangle to fill my page. Now, once I draw my first rectangle, to create the wormhole effect, I simply need to make concentric rectangles. That means all the other rectangles that I'm making are going to have the same center point, but they're gradually going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And since I'm using the same rectangle, it makes sense to use our copy and paste tool in our Autodesk app. So now I'm going to look over here to the right side of my iPad, to that layers panel. And on the layers panel, I notice that I can see my first rectangle here in the first highlighted layer. I'm going to go ahead and click on that highlighted layer so it pulls up my settings box. And I'm going to look for those copy and paste functions in the top row. Remember, if you can't see them, it might be because your layer is locked. So you can always check that little lock in the bottom left-hand corner of your layer. If that lock is closed, tap it once to unlock it, and your settings should appear. Once I can see my settings, I'm going to click Copy, and then I'm going to stay right on that same page, and I'm going to click Paste. It's going to bring me to my copy and paste screen, but remember, it's pasted the rectangle right over top of the last one. So all I need to do is simply take my fingers and pinch that first rectangle so it gets a little bit smaller. I want to do my best to keep it centered, and then I can click Done. And I'm going to repeat that process of pasting, pasting, pasting until I get this little wormhole of rectangles that looks like it disappears into outer space. So I'll click my layer, I'll click paste. Remember, it's this outer rectangle. I'll squeeze it down so it fits in the middle and do my best to center it. And then I'll click Done. I'll click that same layer, and I'll paste it again. And then I'll use my fingers to squeeze it down to size. And I'm going to continue clicking the layer and clicking paste until I only have a very small rectangle in the middle. You notice as I continue to paste this same rectangle, the lines are gradually getting thinner and thinner And we know from our project yesterday, as well as from our perspective sunset, that that's a really important part of making things look like they're disappearing into the distance. Once I've added a few of these rectangles, and I have just a small one in the middle that's maybe about an inch big, it's a little bit bigger than my fingernail, I'm ready to stop drawing those concentric rectangles and I'm ready to start adding my color. Now, if we look at our rectangles, we notice that they're shapes. Even if it's just this outside border, it's still an enclosed space. So I know that my fill bucket is the best tool to use to fill some spaces. So I'm going to come to this top toolbar and I'm going to click on my fill tool. I'm going to be sure that I'm using a solid fill and that my tolerance is in the middle. And for the wormholes, we notice that Jen Stark really stuck to that rainbow effect. So I'm going to come to the bottom dot of my double puff. I'm going to click it once to open up my colors. And you're welcome to use Copic colors or your regular color wheel. I'm going to keep the classic rainbow, so I'm going to use my regular color wheel. I'm going to start with red and fill. I'm going to click again to choose my next color. And I'm going to continue to fill until I get to my middle rectangle. Once I get to the middle rectangle, however, I want to stop for a moment because we want to add a really cool effect right in here that's really going to make it look like it disappears into outer space. So now that I have that wormhole filled with those rainbow of colors, and I have just one rectangle open in the middle, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to come to that bottom dot of my double puff, but this time I'm going to turn it to black. With the black in my double puff, I'm going to switch over to a radial fill. Because one of the things that radial fill reminds me of is like a sun in outer space. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that radial fill. And right here, somewhere in one of the corners of this last open box, because remember, wherever I tap is going to be that lightest part in the middle, I'm going to tap with that radial fill. And again, I can adjust how much or how little of that fill is visible. But once I tap in there, I have an area that remains black with that light center. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my fill bucket because remember, it'll continue to work until I click it again. And when I turn it off, you see that we've created this effect that the sun and outer space is on the other side of this wormhole, really emphasizing that depth that we've created. So now we want to do a little bit more work to our wormhole. So I'm going to come back to, hold that question for a moment, back to the bottom dot of my double puff. Only this time I'm going to go the opposite way and I'm going to lighten it to the color white. And that I can do by simply dragging upwards because we learned that white is the lightest value of every color. Once I've dragged upwards to create my white, I'm going to go ahead over here to the toolbar next to the brushes. I'm going to click on my quick set size selector and I'm going to make it very, very small, somewhere in the 3 range. With that size 3 white inking pen, I'm going to just tap and create little clusters of stars. And I'm going to keep it super random. So some of my stars are closer and others are further away. Now I'm really creating the effect that there's space there on the other side. But you really have to look to get sucked into that space. So the final part of this project is to add some of those fun, poppy sort of cartoons. So to do that, I want to pull some helper images off the internet. So I'm going to go ahead and find my home button and I'm going to click home and I'm going to open up my search engine. Once my search engine is open, now I'm going to search for something that might be in outer space, but also is a little psychedelic. We think 1960s, we think hippies, we think flowers, anything like that will do. I'm going to think outer space, and I'm going to go with a spaceship cartoon. Adding the word cartoon is going to keep that fun poppy style. Remember, once I put my search into my search engine, I want to start by refining it by clicking on images. Now I'm gonna look for a spaceship that looks like it would work with my project and that I can see the entire image. So I'm gonna keep it with this simple one here. Once I've found the image I want, I'll click and hold until my pop-up box opens, and then I'll click Add to Photos. Once I've added it to Photos, I can use my home button to go back home and go back into my Autodesk. I remember that when I insert an image, it'll create a brand new layer. So I don't need to worry about um, keeping the background of this safe. I'm just gonna go up to that top toolbar. I'm gonna find that image insert tool and I'm gonna click there. Now, I can take my tiny image of my spaceship and we're gonna place that image somewhere out here in the rainbow. You probably wanna have it referencing the open area in some way to draw your viewer's eye to that middle section. So it could be coming out of the middle section or it could be going into it. That's up to you. Once you've used your pincher fingers to find the best size and shape for your image that you're adding, you can go ahead and click Done. Now I need to recreate this image in my own style. So I want to remember that to recreate an image, I'll find the layer with the image, I'll click it once to open its settings box, and I'll turn that opacity down. Once the opacity is down, I can come back to my layers panel to add a new layer for my drawing. Remember, when you're drawing, if your drawing comes out gray, it's probably because you're drawing on that lightened layer. Then I'm going to select the color black so I get that nice cartoony outline. And I'm going to check the size of my drawing tool. So use the size that would work best for you. Then I can very easily trace around that reference image that I've added in. I want to make sure to close off all of my spaces so that I can use the fill tool to quickly fill in the designs. I even learned about my draw tool here that can help me draw things like ovals and circles. Once I've drawn my image, I'm going to go ahead and click back on that original drawing so it's highlighted in blue. I'm going to click again to open up the settings box so that I can delete that layer. And it looks like I could just draw my spaceship perfectly. Now, to fill in your spaceship, when it looks like this, it can be a little bit confusing. So if I look back over here to the right side toolbar, I remember that up in the left corner of each of these is an eye. And that's like seeing or not seeing that particular layer. So to make it easier to fill in my space shuttle, on my background layer, I'm going to click that eye. Now all I can see is the space shuttle. And the first thing I want to ask myself is, do I have any openings here that won't let me use my fill tool? So I'm going to turn off my shape tool and I'm going to find those openings and I'm going to close them off. Oop, but I need to make sure I'm drawing on the correct layer. So I'm going to select the layer by clicking it until that blue highlight is around it. And now I'm going to close off any of those open spaces that maybe I missed when I was drawing. Once I've checked my drawings for any openings and I've closed them off, now I'm going to select my fill tool and I'm going to use my fill to fill in this design. So maybe I'll use a linear fill for this so it really looks like it's made of metal. I'll change it back to a regular fill to fill in some of the other parts. And maybe we'll go with this radial fill for the middle. And I remember that I can change these colors after I assign them. Once I've added color, that's when I want to come back over here to the right-hand side and I want to tap that eye again. Because now I can really see what that looks like on the background. And it was much easier on the eyes to add color to this layer when I couldn't see this layer. Remember, you also have some fun things that you can add. So over here on my toolbar, I went ahead and I found my salty watercolor brush. And remember, for you guys, that brush is all the way down here in the artist collection. Once you select your salty watercolor brush, take a look at its size and at its opacity. You probably want your opacity about in the middle. And I'm going to lighten its color to white And one other thing that I can do with this salty watercolor brush is I can create a little trail like it came out of the middle. Now, if that wasn't enough, remember, I can also click on that same layer and I can use my blending to change up this little trail a little bit. So as I click through, you're gonna see all sorts of things happen. Some of these things you might really, really like. So play around with these tools to see if it affects this drawing and makes it even cooler. Once you're happy with your design, you can go ahead and you can turn in your finished piece to this assignment. So I hope you enjoyed our Jen Stark wormhole project.